Welcome to BackBoard Banter on the board with your hosts, Matt Middleton and Kevin Rayner, where the banter's as ferocious as Kevin Durant's hatred of the Brooklyn Nets at this point.
It is just guns blazing left and right. We don't know what the situation is. All we know is that Kevin Durant wants out, and it's probably not going to happen.
Dude, I have no idea what he's doing at this point. I mean, demanding that your coach and your GM get fired, pretty ridiculous, if you ask me. And like, that wasn't his initial want, because that's what he would have said originally. But he asked for a trade, and he wants a trade. We'll see if it happens.
It's a crazy saga at this point. We'll get into it a little bit more later if we want to, because, there are some trades still in the market. Raptors are still potentially in the mix, but, Scotty Barnes not available, obviously, but let's talk about our takes, because it's been a few weeks. This man went on vacation, had his best honeymoon life. I'm over here just living my best brand new puppy life, but we dropped the ball. We dropped the ball hard. We both absolutely did not come through on our takes. And starting with me at least, PJ Tucker, he went to the 76ers. We all knew it was going to happen.
Hey, he picked a team where, there's strong contenders in the East. You had a strong contender in the East. Who could blame you? I mean, we all make mistakes. Just like Jalen Brunson, man, going to the Knicks, like, what a mistake, my friend. He might be, the man there and get to be in the mecca of basketball. But at the end of the day, I really think he should have gone to the Heat if he was serious about winning, because that would have been a stellar team.
That's the thing. The Heat are in a weird situation. They've kind of been like involved in talks, but not really involved in talks. But Jalen Brunson, let's just roll right into it. Let's talk about this Knicks team. I mean, they got their guy. At the end of the day, we can say that they got their guy. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, Jalen Brunson has the opportunity to be good for this team. But will he be franchise changing? Will he be Julius Randle? Like,
No.
that's the interesting point that the Knicks have to figure out now.
Man, I honestly don't think that Jalen Brunson is going to make that big of a difference for this franchise. People are talking about, oh, they haven't had an elite guard in forever. It's like they still don't have an elite guard, guys. I mean, a guy who averaged 16 points a game is pretty good. But when you like take into consideration that the Dallas Mavericks are only a point better with him per 100 possessions, um, it's not great, right? Like, his defense is very, very questionable. He is a good offensive hub, and I really think that he got paid on what he did in the Utah series, where Luka wasn't around. They needed a guy to step up, and Jalen Brunson was that guy. But at this point, man, like, if you're trying to win championships, he can't be your number one option or even your number two option, and that was proven because look, man, the Knicks have nobody like Luca.
Absolutely not. And it's Jalen Brunson, right? Like, for the Knicks to get a guy like him without having to give up assets, I mean, that's a win when you look at it in that singular scope, right? But you have to think about everything around it now. And will this team be relevant? Are people that amped for Jalen Brunson? I know Knicks fans are. Come on, the double overtime win of the beginning of last season, they were outside the Garden. Knicks are here. Like, that's just the beauty of Knicks fans at this point. So it'll be interesting. I don't want to, be completely down on this situation because Jalen Brunson now has the opportunity to prove himself with the big shining lights of New York. I don't know, though. It'll be interesting if RJ lets him in. If that whole situation works out, the Knicks have to really figure out their future. Because Obi Toppin, he's still... We're not sure about where his career is going to go.
Honestly, man, I was looking at the advanced stats on Obi, and I was pretty down on him. They lost Kevin Knox for nothing. They lose Alex Burke and Nerlens Noel for cap space. Really, is what they were doing it for Jalen Brunson. I don't know, how great that roster is going to be, and if they miss the playoffs or are even in the bottom, you know, 3 or 4 of the conference, like, count me as one of the people who isn't shocked.
Yeah,
So
I have a little bit more faith in them, I think. I'm hoping that Jalen Brunson can unlock RJ, can unlock Cam, because they've got Cam Reddish now as well. So I'm not going to be down on them, but I'm also definitely not putting them in the playoffs. That is for sure.
man, no way they're making the playoffs in that tough Eastern Conference, especially when, like, you know, Chicago's only going to be better. We saw them at the beginning of last year. They signed Zach LaVine, which I was shocked, man. I thought Zach was out of there. I thought, DeMar was taking up too much of the offense and he wanted to be the focal point again, which, I mean, we've all seen that. It's a bottom third NBA team when Zach LaVine is your guy. But hey, man, with Zach LaVine, with DeMar coming back, with Vucevic, with if Lonzo can stay healthy for the full season, we saw that they could be a very, very formidable team. And even they gave Milwaukee that one game, so they
I
could they
mean,
could do something maybe.
Matt knows that I was high on the Bulls. I was sad that they weren't able to keep that chemistry because of the injuries that they were dealing with. And Bulls fans can stop sweating every night when they go to bed, thinking they're gonna wake up in the morning and LaVine was gonna be gone. He signed, he stayed. Vucevic apparently is having talks about an extension that he wants to stay. Whether that's good or bad for the franchise, you have a good center, so I'm gonna say good for the franchise. But if the team can stay healthy, we saw through the first 20, 30, 40 games of last year's season, they were relevant and they were around. DeMar was in the MVP race, right? So we'll see what happens for this interesting Bulls team.
Dude, they need to keep Vucevic because after giving up Wendell Carter Jr. and Lauri Markkanen, like they're pretty depleted on the young up and coming
Absolutely.
bigs at this point. And so, I mean, they traded for Vucevic. They got to keep him at this point, especially what they're trying to do. They're trying to win with numbers. They're not trying to win with that one star, which
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate and I think is a decent strategy. It just hasn't been done since the '04 Pistons. So
Yeah, I think
hopefully they
I
can do
think
it though.
I think they picked up Goran. I think Goran joined this team, right? They got somebody else
Mediocre,
important that I can't think of who joined the squad. But
bro. Did you just call Goran important? The man would
all
have
right,
been
all
on
right.
Toronto Raptors, who were the fifth seed. Instead, he went to the Brooklyn Nets, who got swept out of the playoffs as
I'll give you
the
that.
seventh seed. So,
Important to them, maybe.
man,
Maybe the fans could be happy. But like, if the Bulls can stay healthy and they can figure out their rotations, they're going to be a good team. But you got me on Goran there. I'll give you that.
higher aspirations. Getting swept by the Celtics, right?
Okay, before we move on, we have to talk about Bradley Beal. Obviously, this guy has decided to stay. Washington is in a good place when you consider that they could have had Westbrook right now, but they have a bunch of other assets instead. And Bradley Beal has shown his loyalty and is willing to stay for a very large amount of money.
Well, yeah, when you're gonna pay somebody that much money and that's the only place that you can get that kind of money. I understand why he took it. I think it's really funny though that NBA fans are like clowning him for staying when so many NBA fans get so mad when somebody leaves. They're clowning Dame too. Those two guys have been true loyal, servants, I guess, of their team, and they,
Servants.
well, I guess
Yeah,
like
it's
that's
true
that's
though.
the
Yeah.
expression, and they come, they do their thing, they put up gaudy stats, and then they don't make the playoffs. But I'd like to see Bradley Beal on a playoff team personally.
I have hopes that Bradley Beal can get a buzzer-beating play-in game shot to lead them in to then probably lose to Milwaukee. Like you never know, but I would love to see obviously more Bradley Beal. He's a great talent and he deserves to get to play basketball. He really does, and hopefully the Wizards can build up around him. Denny Avdija is a good player. Kuzma is still Kuzma. He's been tweeting out about the Raptors randomly. He's been liking all of the Rico Hines runs from the boys. So maybe there's something funny happening there. I don't know. He's probably just begging to get out of Washington. But I want more for Bradley Beal. I hope for some good things for this team, but we will see.
Yeah, man, yeah, it's definitely up in the air, and they did show improvements. I mean, I thought they were going to be a worse team last year than they were the year before, and like it was just marginal. But with all the rotating pieces, with all the young and up and coming pieces, hopefully they can all take a step. Roy Hachimura,
Rui.
that guy, Roy,
Yeah, I don't know.
sorry,
I don't know what's happening with Rui. His story got a little interesting at the end of the season last year.
yeah, but we'll see. I mean, he could come back and play pretty well. So they're the Wizards, though, man. Like I ain't
Es-
scared.
Especially with the way the Eastern Conference is, right? The situation that we're in right now. So let's take a little detour right now. I want to talk about LeBron James. All right, I want to talk about all this stuff because
My
Matt
guy.
and I, yeah, obviously Matt's guy over here, but we've been seeing all these clips, right? There's all these pro-am leagues, all these basketball. Everyone is pumped, just waiting for the season to happen. But one of the crazy stories that I've heard happened just a little while ago when LeBron decides that he's going to join DeMar and go play in the Drew League. which it's been a very long time since LeBron would show up, and he did pretty good. Classic LeBron James shows up, 42 points, 16 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals. A master class for such an amazing player of LeBron James caliber. Matt's probably like, I wish I got to see a game like that. The guy was probably going off offensively. It would have been great to see. But the real part of this story is the guy that he played one-on-one with all last night. This guy, Dion Wright, he's a classic NBA Twitter user. In 2011, 2012, he was talking smack all over Twitter about how, LeBron's not clutch, the Heat aren't going to win, he's got to go back to Cleveland, blah, 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 blah. But what I didn't know is that this guy's actually a good basketball player. And he put up 20 points and 6 rebounds against LeBron and DeMar, and they only lost by 2 points. Kind of crazy to see. But for LeBron to just kind of destroy this guy after, potentially 10 years of beef is kind of amazing. But also, well done, Dion. Good for you getting that close.
Honestly, good for them for being within 2 points, but it's an inconsequential game. Um, I don't even think LeBron and Demar are running it that hard. Do they want to risk injury right before the season, in a pro am game, in a Drew League game? Probably not. So I'm sure the defensive effort was very suspect. And even the offensive effort, I'm sure they weren't, pulling out the full bag of tricks that they have. So
I mean, we got Malachi dropping 72 points, in these games. Kyle Kuzma dropping 70 points on Scotty. Right? Anything's possible with the right players.
Scotty dropped 79 in a pro am game just recently, and at the end of the day, man, yeah, I love Scotty. If Scotty averages 20 points in the NBA this year, I'm gonna be ecstatic. So
Uh,
you can
Absolutely,
drop
but
points if you're an
it's
NBA
just a
player.
hilarious story that a bunch of people are talking about right now, and I thought this is kind of crazy. I'm never gonna tweet at any NBA player that they're not clutch or trash because if I met if I met Chris Boucher on the basketball court, he's dropping 200 points on my head. That's for sure.
Easy, buddy, and I maybe get 4, maybe.
Oh yeah, I'd put up maybe a free throw if LeBron gives me one opportunity to shoot one because I can shoot free throws. That's the extent of my abilities. But let's keep it rolling here, Matt. Let's talk about the Grizzlies now. One of my favorite teams. I love the Grizzlies. John Morant, Matt knows, is my favorite young player in the NBA right now. But we're not talking about that Jay. We're talking about Jaren Jackson Jr. The guy about a month ago he had surgery on his fractured foot. He's gonna be out 3 to 5 months still from now, so he's going to miss the start of the season. Now, the Grizzlies had a crazy run, Matt. They brought themselves into relevancy. Ja took his college boys atmosphere around him. Taylor Jenkins deservingly took that team decently far and had a great regular season and a good playoff close to it. You have to say that, right? Losing to the eventual champions. So, Matt, are you excited for the Grizz? Do you think they can keep this relevancy up? Will it hurt to miss Jaren Jackson Jr.? That's a given. What's your thoughts?
Well, obviously it's a given to miss Jaren Jackson Jr. It's definitely gonna slow their start. If he takes the full 5 months, it's gonna be December, but he could come back. At the very beginning of the season in October. They don't normally start until mid October, so he's got some time. Athletes heal nowadays really quickly with modern medicine. It's pretty impressive. But yeah, man, I think your Grizzlies are legit. I think at the end of the day, what they proved in the playoffs, not having John Morant, and what they beat Golden State by 50 points or something like that, 59. Um, and so when you can do that, obviously Golden State expected them to roll over and just kind of give them the game, and they
Yep.
didn't show up prepared. So they eventually won the series, obviously, and are the champions. But I think that what they're doing, the way that they're building their team, the players that they picked up, having Desmond Bain as your, secondary point guard is just unfair at this point because I would like Desmond Bain as our maybe primary point guard as much as I
De-
love Fred VanVleet.
Desmond
Just the
Bain to Matt is John Morant to me, just so everyone can figure that out right now.
he's not, man. He's just the one who got away. Okay, I love this man on the Raptors squad right now over Malachi Flynn. But yeah, man, I think they're a really exciting young team in the NBA. I think last year proved that they're going to be around for a while as long as they can keep this young core together. And I haven't even talked about our Canadian boys, which I love. I love Brandon Clark and I love Dylan Brooks. I think they bring a lot to the table. They're underrated players for sure, and I think Memphis is going to have another legit season. And if you think about the fact that Phoenix is probably going to take a step back this year, um, Golden State's still going to be Golden State. Dallas, we'll see how the Christian Wood for Jalen Brunson thing kind of works out.
Yep.
I Memphis being in the top three of that conference, it wouldn't surprise me. So
And when you confirm that they'll for sure be a top 6 and 5, because when you go down the list and you think further, can the Clippers beat them? Is that big three going to be worthwhile? Maybe, right?
can they stay
The
healthy?
Nuggets are they going to stay healthy, right? Are the Lakers going to show up, right? Like the West it's got a couple of teams that can figure it out, but I think the Grizzlies, through what they showed last year and John Morant getting over that second year hump and getting into the relevancy that he was and having the confidence of that team behind him, I think we've seen a team that looks like they want to be a top 6 team in the West, out of the play in for the next maybe 5 years if they do it right.
Well, I think when you have a player like John Morant, like that should be the bare minimum, right? And the players that they have around him, I think they have one of the deepest rosters in the NBA. Now they did give up some of that depth, to Philadelphia. I think they stole, forget his name, but it'll come to me eventually. D'Anthony Milton.
Oh yes, Melton is gone. I believe you're right.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah,
he
so
was
rest in
a
peace.
very, very resourceful and underrated player on that team. But again, I think they've got enough around Jaw and Jaren Jackson Jr. and that the continued development of their younger players, specifically those two guys who are extremely young, um, the sky's the limit for this team. They could easily be like, you know, the Golden State Warriors in 7 years. So
I'm glad we're on the same page there, because I'll talk about the Grizzlies all season long. They're going to be one of those teams that I'm excited to talk about, excited to watch as well, right? Like when I think about the Western Conference teams, they're exciting to me, right? Like everyone else that's really up there, we've seen it before, or it's just good basketball play. The Grizzlies have that little edge of excitement, and John Morant really is the driving force for that.
yeah, and I think in the West there's just a little bit more unknown. There's a lot more continuity in the East. We know a lot of about what the good teams are going to look like, but I mean, you've got the Grizzlies who came out of nowhere last year, the Pelicans who have Zion coming back and that weight clause in
Amazing contract clause.
honestly, if you're the Pelicans, you're just protecting yourself and your asset, right? Because you brought this up previously, and I really like the idea of it. Is if Zion is at that line and he's out on the town, and they're going out and maybe having a couple drinks or maybe going out for a late night snack, is he thinking to himself like, is this burger going to cost me $10,000? And that is a good thought to put in the most important player on your team's head, especially when weight is probably his primary issue in the NBA. Like in terms of like what he can do and who he is, the only thing that's stopping him from being, I think, a top 5 player in the NBA currently is the fact that he can't stay on the court.
And we want it for the Pelicans. Matt might even he would sell his pinky finger to see the Pelicans in the playoffs. This man loves Zion, so I'm hoping for more for the future from this team.
I'm also a Brandon Ingram guy. Like I think that he showed a
Sure.
lot last year too. CJ McCollum, like that team is going to be really good, I think, this year. But then again, like you mentioned, the Clippers are going to be back. Can the Lakers figure it out? How much did the Suns take a step back? And then you got to throw in the Wolves, man. Like
My sleeper team.
everybody's sleeper team at this point. Like they trade for Rudy Gobert. I didn't love the trade personally,
Man,
uh, but
the
we can talk about it.
my favorite joke that I have read about the Rudy Gobert trade is that Rudy Gobert is going to go down in history as the greatest defender the NBA has ever seen. Not only is he a 3-time defensive player in the year, but he shut the entire world down with his antics, and then he shut down the entirety of this NBA offseason after his trade. Kevin Durant can't get traded, Mitchell can't get traded, all because this guy got traded for 5 first-round picks. Like, it is insanity on one hand, but on the other hand, I do really like Rudy Gobert on this team, man. I really do.
I okay, I agree with you. I think that he and Cat are kind of like the perfect complements to each other, right? Cat is such an offensive big, can score at all 3 levels, and is probably the most versatile big outside of Nikola Jokic in the NBA.
Yes, for sure.
Um, where he struggles is post defending, is paint defending. That's his major issue. Well, you just inserted the premier NBA paint defender who struggles on offense. So you theoretically would think they would match, each other and be able to hide each other's flaws. I think they're going to be a good regular season team. I just don't know what it's going to come down to in the playoffs, and
And
that's
that is the question, right?
that's why like I don't give up all those first round picks personally.
It's why we didn't want to give up all the first round picks for him because yes, would he have come in and been great? Yes, because he allows you to not take away the ball out of the hands of your players that want to get 20 points, that want to try to score 25 points in the night, right? That's what's really good for Ant-Man. That's what's really good for Cat. And will it be good for Russell? We're going to find out, right? Like that's the interesting point of this team. They've got a lot of options, right? And the question, though, the reason the concern is there and why people aren't high on them yet is, well, is the regular season thing a Rudy Gobert thing or is it a Utah Jazz thing? Where is that history going to continue? Because obviously, if Gobert can come with this team and come into a brand new system that is, he's obviously never been a part of and he has to figure out how to make it work because Utah's system has revolved around that guy for years. If he can come in and they can make a splash and make a statement and Utah fizzles out because maybe they trade Mitchell, maybe they don't, and they aren't as successful, the storyline changes, right? The subject matter changes, and it's the Utah playoff curse. It's not the Gobert situation anymore.
Yeah, I think though that as the one of the primary players on that team and having been on some rosters that were like runaway best team in the NBA, best team in the Western Conference, and then to have the playoff failures that they do, you've got to lay it at the players' feet. They win the games and they lose the games. The coaching staff can only do so much. The GM can only put so many players in place. It's got to be up to the roster that's constructed. And I just think that you know the more you read about the trade, the 23, the 25, and the 27 are unprotected first round picks. So you're looking at the next 5 years potentially of you needing to be in the back half of the draft because giving up a top 10 pick or three top 10 picks potentially would not look good. So for me, like I think that they're definitely going to be in the back half of the draft. Just for how long is going to be the question, and then how much does he actually push them in the playoffs to actually being relevant and being a championship contender? I don't. Again, I he's the one of the premier defenders in the NBA.
He's
But
the premier big, like the premier big defender in the NBA right now.
but at the end of the day, his stats have gone down. Last season, his on off numbers got worse than they did the year before. This was the first year of his career since his sophomore year that he was a negative on offense in terms of on off court. Um, he was 8.4 points. His team defended 8.4 points better with him on the court, but last year it was 12.7.
Yeah,
So that's actually a pretty big drop off. He's 30 years old now. He's pushing towards that line of where NBA players maybe start to break down, especially bigs. So if he's healthy and relevant, yeah, they're in the back half of the draft. If he's not, and that team struggles, and you're giving up top 10 picks,
that's the thing. And can Cat stay healthy? Is Anthony Edwards going to take that step? Can Russell actually be a part of this team? Can they figure it all out? That's the question of the T-Wolves, and that's why they are a sleeper team. I'm just excited to watch it. I think that they're gonna have some really high flying action. Anthony Edwards is gonna love running around with this team, and I think Cat, without having to think about any type of defensive responsibilities, which he has shown he doesn't really want to think about defense as much as possible, right? So it could be good, but I'm still with you a little bit, right? Like I think I'm a little bit higher on this team than you are, but the season is really going to show it, and we're going to be 20 games into the season, and it's going to be really telling, and I'm interested to see where the Wolves are going to find themselves.
yeah, man, I think like 48 wins is the floor for this team. Like I honestly believe with the four players that you mentioned above filling out the roster, like they've got enough to be a 48 win team in the Western Conference. It's just to me, it's not about winning in the season. Like you can be as Raptors fans, we know it, man. We went through it.
Yep.
The LeBronto years, we were number one team in the Eastern Conference. Like, great for us. You get to hang a banner, a regular season banner. Looks great, feels good. Yeah, it sucks come playoff time. So,
Absolutely.
and at the end of the day, that's what fans want. That's what we're chasing, right? And that's, I guess, the debate for the Kevin Durant trade for Scotty Barnes. But hey, man, I'm glad we made our decision.
I'm glad that at least the conversation came out that wasn't happening. But the main reason I like the T Wolves is because I want the Grizzlies and T Wolves to become a rivalry. I want Wolves versus Bears to just head to head all the time. I want to see that potentially happen, and I think John Morant and Anthony Edwards are two players that could build a fantastic rivalry that the NBA could profit off of.
Man, absolutely. That first round series last year was, I think, one of the best first round series that we got to watch. So it was it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's roll along here. I'm pretty much done. Matt knows I'll talk about the Grizzlies forever, so we can stand here for days. But there was another big trade. A guy by the name of Malcolm Brogdon, who Matt and I have always liked. I believe. I feel like Matt's been always very high on Malcolm Brogdon. I believe.
Dude, when the Milwaukee Bucks let him go for, I think it was like a first round pick or something, I was floored because at the end of the day, a first round pick has to materialize into something. Like it has to become Malcolm Brogdon. It has to become, a player of substance. Malcolm Brogdon, for all of his flaws on, offense or maybe athletically, he's a heck of a defender. He's a underrated playmaker. He gets to the basket very, very often and can create for his teammates from that position. He collapses the defense and knows how to utilize it. I just, to me, I would have, liked to see him still with Milwaukee, and then for Indiana to give him up for basically spare parts. I mean, I think the two flyers are really the first round pick from the Celtics, which is going to be in the back half again because they're not taking a step back. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are only going to get better, and Aaron Naismith, who maybe he's being underutilized in Boston, maybe he was being underdeveloped because they're not really focusing on him. They don't need him to be at that level. They've got two players at that level, so maybe those are the two things that work out. But man, Pacers, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a great pickup. Celtics getting better. Cry tears over here. Dang it, Boston. But it is what it is, right? That we have to deal with the Eastern Conference being good, and if you want to be the best team, you got to go through the best teams. And the Celtics are in that situation. Are they going to go for the KD trade? Are they not? Who knows? We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Malcolm Brogdon is going to be a good fit, and I'm excited to see him work out and get a great opportunity to have postseason success because he hasn't had that right with the Pacers.
Yeah, absolutely. He hasn't had it. So I think he augments this team very well. I think he's more of the true point guard. And now you can kind of, use Smart as the primary defender and
Yeah.
a little bit more off ball, which Smart has shown that he can catch fire from three off ball.
Oh
So
yes.
I think this was sneaky good trade for Boston. Um, like I actually think this is probably going to make Boston the number one team in the East next year.
I mean, they're
Personally,
saying that Boston is going to be the number one. Everyone's talking about Boston right now, obviously, because sadly, with the passing of Bill Russell recently, it is on everyone's mind. Can't believe this morning the NBA is actually going to retire his jersey league wide.
they should.
Pretty insane that it's going to happen, but he was, I mean, an 11-time champion, 2-time Hall of Famer, active civil rights activist. He was there when they were protesting against Vietnam. He was always there. He was a man and he was a legend. And so rest in peace to Bill Russell. And I'm excited to see the tributes that we're gonna see throughout this season.
Dude, he's the true, like, everyone loves the 6 for 6 argument. No. Like I think he's like what, 11 of 12?
11, 13.
11 of 13? He's the true championship goat, man. Like to go to the finals 13 times, to win it 11 times, to be the focal point on almost every single one of those teams. You can't say more about Bill Russell, man. He like it was just a tragic loss, but he lived a fabulous life and well deserving fabulous life for sure.
Absolute GOAT candidate for the 60s era. In his time, he was a legend. But, man, I don't really want to talk about the Celtics anymore. Honestly, the Malcolm Brogdon trade is going to be great. We'll break down his success throughout the season. The rest of it doesn't matter. Will they not miss Daniel Tice? We'll find out. But I want to talk about the Hawks a little bit before we move on to the Raptors real quick. Because the Hawks swapped Kevin Huerter, which I totally forgot about, right? And they got Mo Harkless and they got Justin Holiday. The Hawks are trying to get back to relevancy. We talked about the DeJounte trade earlier. We talked about Trey needing to get back to relevancy. Is this a good trade? Are they going to miss him? Like, Hawks, where are you? You're trying to figure it all out.
Well, I think that's the biggest issue for them, right? Is like they know that Trey Young at worst is like a top 10 offensive player in this league, like at worst.
Yeah.
So Kevin Herter, like as good as he is, and like I'm a big Kevin Herter fan. I think that in a bigger role he can provide more than what he has for Atlanta. But I think he's mostly offense. Like he's an offensive player. He's not necessarily a two-way player. He's not definitely not a defensive player. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to sub that out for maybe a little bit more length and grittiness on their wing spots in Mo Harkless and Justin Holiday. I know Kevin Herter's 6'7", but he's not a wing defender like those two guys are. So I think it makes sense for the Hawks. But I think as the Kings, like we love to rag on the Kings, man. I think this was a great trade for them. I think he's a great 3-point shooter. The addition of him, Monk, the Keegan Murray draft pick, like what they're building out there, it might actually work. It might actually be worth a play-in spot, which is shocking for me because the Kings.
Let it be known that I had a little indoctrination on Matt because I believe 2-3 weeks ago I came to this guy and I was like, yo, the Kings might actually do it this year. And by do it, I mean make the play-in. Right now, the focus is the 15-year streak that they're trying to deal with to actually make the playoffs, right?
Can I just interject for 1 second?
Yeah.
Craziest stat that no current NBA player has ever faced the Sacramento Kings in the playoffs.
Yeah, insane, right? But they've put together a decent roster, and I'm really excited for De'Aaron Fox. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to have a amazing campaign, potentially all-star worthy campaign with this team around him. He's never had this amount of spacing. He's never had this type of shooters around him. And as sad as it was to see Tyrese go, because you know that Tyrese could be maybe not a star in this league, but he's going to be a great shooter. He's going to be a great backcourt piece for a team come down the line. He isn't the right piece around De'Aaron. So it's going to be interesting. And him and Sabonis didn't get a lot of time together, so I'm excited for the Kings, Matt. I can't believe I am, but I am excited.
In the back half of the year, he and Sabonis were one of the most threatening pick-and-roll players in the league as a duo. Yeah. And I agree with your take that, yes, Tyrese Halliburton potentially could be a star. Like, he has, maybe that star potential. He definitely has all-star, consistent level potential. And they gave up that for Sabonis. But they gave up a player who didn't work around him, a guy who probably needs the ball in his hand, a guy who I think is going to be really good for Indiana on a really bad team. So we can see his stats explode, his efficiency probably go down. But I think that the Kings are trying to fit with what they've got, and I think that's probably the smartest thing that they can do. But when the Kings make moves, man, I just think it's wrong. Have you seen those memes of like the team that the Kings could have if they just drafted the player after?
Oh,
it's
yes.
like Klay Thompson over Luke Kennard. Like there's so many. Like it's
if
ridiculous.
Kings fans want
Luka,
anything,
Marvin.
don't even bring up Luka, Marvin. You're gonna anger some Kings fans. But if Kings fans want anything right now, they want to move into the next era. They want to move away from this step. And this team, I think, for the first time in at least the time that I've been paying attention to the Kings in the past few years, I think this team has the potential to do it, to get close, to potentially get to the playoffs, which would be really exciting for Sacramento fans.
Man, it'd be the most exciting thing that's happened to them in 20 years.
Probably. But so not much to say about the Hawks. Obviously, we mentioned that we think that they're trying to be relevant, and we will see, right? They really need to bounce back from where they were to where they are now. But I think it's almost time for Raptors chat, man. We could talk about KD a little bit if you want. Really, just the fact that OG Gary Trent and a couple of picks is still the best offer, unless Jaylen Brown is on the table in my mind.
At the end of the day, man, we could get into it more probably next week. Save us some content, and we can talk about who's left on the market. Maybe there's some signings in that time.
Totally.
But you're right, man. Like if we offered Pascal Siakam in a first round pick, that's probably the best offer that they're gonna get. So, and I'm all in for that.
I mean, that's what Kawhi took. DeMar, Jakob, and a first for, what turned out to be a great trade for Danny Green. Danny Money Green, the legend, who Matt knows that I love. But that's the thing. The market is so inflated because of Rudy that I really don't believe KD's going to get traded. So, of course, we can wait to talk about it because this is what we're here for. This is what me and Matt love to talk about. It's Raptors time, baby. And there is so much to think about right now. Because Scotty B, our boy, has come out swinging. The boys look good at Rico Hines. Matt, where do you want to start? Where do you want to go? I'm going to leave this up to you.
Bro, it's so funny because you're like, oh, there's so much to think about, and in my head, I'm going, no, there's one thing to think about. His name is Scotty Barnes, and like that's all that we care about. This guy he's showing out. He's hitting half court threes in pro am games. His lift looks unbelievable. I'm obviously starting with Scotty because Scotty is our future, and it could be next season, man. He could be an all-star next season. He could be a top 10 player in the Eastern Conference next season. He's got that kind of potential, that kind of motor, and that kind of willpower. Like I think that was at the time I thought it was a mistake, and now I just look like a fool. So, and I'll admit it.
We are here. I mean, that's the thing. We all make mistakes at the end of the day. But Scotty Barnes looked like he took the off season and wanted to really make use of his time. Matt joked with me after his exit interview, and he was just like, "I'm locked in. I'm ready to go." And then his Instagram photos for a couple days are just him on the beach chilling, relaxing. But
he needs a vacation.
That's the thing. Everyone needs a vacation. This guy was living his best life over in Greece on vacation just a few weeks ago. But you got to come back to reality, and you got to grind, and you got to work. And for a 21-year-old kid to look the way that he does, to have proven that he's willing to work on his game, Ben Simmons fans are crying right now because, man, Scotty looks legit, and he looks like he's going to come into this season ready to swing, ready to play. I'm excited.
Oh, man. I am so glad that we never traded that pick and that we use it on Scotty because he's going to augment our team. I've loved what I've seen in the Rico Hines runs. I love that the whole team's there too. Like, OG, Delano, Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. We got all the backups, Chris Boucher, Koloko, Flynn, even Fred VanVleet showed up for a little bit. I like the chemistry that I saw from them in some videos, man. Koloko and Fred VanVleet, already look like to be on the same page. And as much as, Precious came out in the second half of last year and really showed who he is. At the beginning of the year, he and Fred, it was hard for them to connect on a lot of lob passes. There was a lot of lobs that missed or hit the rim or that were just poorly timed. That it seems like Koloko and Fred already got that timing down, already know when to cut, already know how to pick the defense apart, which just makes me more excited because that gives us roster flexibility and lineup flexibility. So
that's the most important thing. And that's, I think, the most important thing to talk about today. Like, obviously, seeing Fred and Koloko together is great. It's where we can see our veteran presence of Fred knowing how to work with young talent, knowing how to make things work. Because, as much as we don't know a ton about basketball, we'd like to think we know a decent amount of basketball at this point. And when you can see a player like Koloko providing success for a player like Fred, you know that there's a dynamic there, right? And the Raptors culture is about bringing these guys together to work on their skills and lift them up to be a competent NBA team. And that's what we are going to see. So, Matt, let's talk about some rotation options. Let's talk about last year. Let's talk about this year. Obviously, the stats from our main squad, Gary, Fred, OG, Scotty, Siakam, a plus 2.8 over 700 minutes last season. Kind of an insane stat. Obviously, we were a successful team. That's why we get these positives. But we want to see more. 7, 8-man rotations. Nurse is bleeding these guys dry by the end of the season. So we want to see more. So I'm just more excited for the options that we can have, as Matt talked about earlier, to bring in these different guys to see different rosters together and hopefully get a 9-10 rotation going throughout the season.
Yeah, well, I think one, adding Thad Young and Otto Porter Jr. into the rotation on a consistent basis is going to be huge for us.
Yep.
It's going to give us a lot more flexibility to slide people around. We can slide Scotty more at the point. We can put Siakam more at the point. Now that we've got even more options to give them, off court time. I'm worried about our guard spots still. I know some people are high on Jeff Doughton Jr. Maybe Delano Banton can take a step. Maybe Malachi Flynn's, pro-am showing actually comes to fruition in the
Let's hope.
NBA. Um, but I'm not holding my breath, man.
No.
So for me, I think, outside of that 5-man rotation that you talked about, I think a really smart idea might be to insert Precious in at the 5, slide Pascal and Scotty over to the 3-4. I might leave OG at the 2. I might take him out and put Gary Trent there and see if I can get OG to be the man on the second unit and be that extra scoring punch. But I know that, out of the two, Gary Trent and OG, Gary Trent's shown more as a pure scorer, as a
Yep.
pure, microwave heater.
It's going to be hard, right? Because obviously both Fred and Gary are in a contract year at this point, and Gary will want to be a starter, right? And he's probably going to be closing out games, especially when he's hot in certain scenarios. So for me, I'm kind of the mindset that, like, stick to that classic starting 5 that you had last year. That's great, but rotate these guys out. Give us some more options. Fred, Chris, Banton, Precious, and Scotty were a plus 64 together last season. Now, 19 minutes, okay? Stat man over here pulling out what I like to see. But, like, when you have Fred, Gary, Scotty, Siakam, and Precious, no OG, you have 297 minutes. You have them at a plus 14 per. That gives you the confidence that you can have when you can bring in guys like Precious. And the other really important point is OG wants to have his show. He wants to have his time, right? That's what the conversations are. He's not happy because he doesn't have his role, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Now that we have bench pieces, now that we have things going together, when you have to take out Pascal, when you have to take out Fred, if Scotty's maybe not having his best right night, let's let OG run the ball more. And that doesn't mean he has to be in the starting unit of that core 5. It means that you can have Banton come in. You can have Otto come in. You can have Thad come in. And that's what we want to see more, is just options. Play the guys more. Make it so that we can have 3 less minutes per average for our guys that are almost 30. Like, come on, Nurse. Give them a little bit of break. That's what I want to see.
And honestly, man, if Fred VanVleet can make Koloko an actual rotational option, with the chemistry that they're showing,
Yeah.
it gives us even more options. Because if you could insert Koloko into the starting lineup and take OG out, then you can run like literally like a second man 5 unit of OG, Delano, Thad, Porter Jr., and Precious, which that's a pretty good lineup to me as a second like starting 5, quote unquote,
Yeah.
like backup 5. That's sick, and that's a 10-man deep rotation that we can go to on a consistent basis. And we're not even banking on Malachi Flynn maybe taking the next step, or Jeff Doughton Jr. being able to crack our rotation, or Justin Champagnie taking another step forward in his development and maybe being an even more NBA ready player. So man, I like it, and I think that Nick's got way more options than he did last year for sure to be able to mix and match.
We as Raps fans just want Bench Mob to come back. We had a special time in our lives when we got to enjoy Bench Mob, and we have the options this year, right? And that's why, people are afraid to put Gary on the bench because, Gary thrives as an off-ball shooter. He thrives with good ball handlers around him that can provide him the shots that he needs. And is Banton going to be that? Is Malachi going to be that? Putting OG there allows him to be more of a ball handler, to be more of an offensive showman with that second unit, right? Will we have an actual second unit from Nurse's track record? Probably not. But if we can start to have that more semblance, like there are times when none of our starters were on the court, and I'm sitting there going, is Nurse okay? Like, how did this happen? How did we get here? Like, you were never expecting it as a Raptors fan last season. And if we want to be the playoff successful team that is our next step, we have to get away from the winning as many possible games, winning every opportunity in the regular season with our guys, because the Utah Jazz has proven that means nothing, right? So I want to see more from everybody on this team. I want to see a 10-man roster if we can make it happen regularly throughout the season.
Dude, we talked about it. The in the Gobert trade, the goal isn't to win the most regular season games that you possibly can. It's to be ready for the playoffs and to win 16 playoff games. That is the goal of should be the goal of every single franchise at the start
Yep.
of the year. That is what you should be trying to play, like make your team for. So I think that last year it was a bigger transition year for us. We've got a lot more continuity this year. Guys aren't trying to figure out their roles. It took half a season for Precious and
Oh
Chris
man.
to accept what they needed to
Yeah.
do in order to stay on the court. It's not that they didn't have the talents that they were trying to use. It's just that we didn't need them to utilize those talents to the extent that they wanted to. And so they had to take a step back in the offensive roles, that they wanted to have, but it was for the betterment of the team. And this year we're coming in, we already know about that. We've got our guys, we've got our rotation, at least we know who our top five guys are,
Yeah.
and I think we've got a pretty good idea who 6 to 10 is as well.
Our Raptors culture is also strong, and we saw it obviously. Talking about Chris, talking about Precious, and the idea of we are trying to win a championship, and if the conversation for each of these players changes from me to we, we're gonna provide success, and we're gonna be able to get as far as we know this team can go. And so it's gonna be a really exciting season ahead of us. Is there anything else about this season specifically that you want to discuss?
Oh man, just that they should probably cut Svi, take the L, man. Um,
I forgot about Svi.
that's about it. That's the thing. Like we don't even have to worry about him this year. Like trying to show up and trying to be a 3 point shooter. Um, Bro Cruz, he he's been hitting some pretty good three clips
Six
when
foot
given the
nine.
opportunity. He's 6'9", so we don't lose that length. But yeah, man, I'm excited for the season. I think that we've got a really good squad. And it'll just be, can we all stay healthy? Can the young guys develop? Is Scotty truly who we think he is? And we're both convinced that he is, but we'll see.
And the future is bright. The future is literally right now for this team. Not only do we have a team that is relevant and is willing to potentially win 50 games in a regular season and then go on to have playoff success. Now we have almost every one of our draft picks going into the future. We're missing one second round pick that we owe to the Grizzlies for Marc Gasol, who I'll happily give up that second round pick for Daddy Gasol. But I'm excited. The Raptors are in such a good place. We've discussed over the past few years, that we've been doing this, that, it's crazy how lucky we can be as a franchise. And part of that luck is our front office making the right decisions. And so let's hope that the decisions keep happening, because the next few seasons are going to be really telling of where our team is going to go. Are we going to be a team that stays relevant and keeps fighting in the playoffs? Or are we going to lose our players? Are we going to mismanage and find ourselves in the bottom half of the teams, which I don't know if I can see that, man. There's just so much positivity and consistency that we've seen over the past few years, and LeBron is not going to exist in the league in a few years. So hey, here we go.
Honestly, man, everybody when the Kevin Durant trade came about was saying, of course you trade Scotty Barnes for Kevin Durant. The goal is to win a championship today. And as much as I agree with the statement that the goal every year should be to win the championship and to be as good as you possibly can be to win the championship, I'm going to throw it to hockey here just because it's an easy reference for me. You don't want to gut your team in order for one shot, because if that shot doesn't work out, then you end up in a situation like the Montreal Canadiens. Marc Bergevin gutted his team in order to put enough pieces around Carey Price and Shea Weber that if everything went right and those two guys played up to their
Yeah,
capabilities and their standard, and Shea Weber specifically being able to elevate a team around him because of his leadership style and quality.
true.
um, we saw it. He was that close. He was three
They
wins
really
away from a
were.
Stanley Cup. He was the closest it's ever been in my lifetime. I've never seen anything that close for the Montreal Canadiens. Look at them now. They are decimated. They have contract issues everywhere. They have, you know, so many pieces that don't fit on the roster, and their new management, while everyone's excited about it, is really just trying to flip it on the fly. And so I love that Masai stayed true to himself and stayed true to the fact that you want a sustainable winning franchise. You don't just want that 1 year championship. He already got it. We got it with Kawhi,
Yep.
and he's sticking true to his guns, and it just makes me happy, man. It's the
And
right call.
The KD trade might happen, like for Scotty, if we haven't have made the Kawhi trade, right? If we haven't already been through that, because you don't know where the management feels, but it's such a different situation, right? Because you talk about trading for that one opportunity. The Raptors did it right. We got our opportunity, and we didn't get massively messed over because yeah, KD has 3-4 years still on his contract, but in a year from now when he's unhappy, he's gone, right? Kawhi, at least we didn't lose anything. We did. We lost Amar and we lost Jakob Poeltl, an amazing good center in the current NBA. But we got our championship and we have found our way back to relevancy just a few years later. So I mean, hey, it's a win. And I don't think the KD trade for Scotty would be a win.
Well, I think the Kawhi Leonard trade went about as well as you could when you get gutted like that. Like
Absolutely.
Masai gutted our team. He gutted, DeMar and longevity of being a 50 plus win team, um, for that chance, and it worked out, and it went perfect, right? Like we won the championship in that 1 year.
Yeah.
You can't say that it didn't work out perfectly. But I think the next two, well, not the next year because we were still like one of the better teams in the NBA, but the year after that, like it showed that you want sustainable winning. You want, a core of players to continue to grow, and when they're getting older, kind of like the Golden State, you have the next young core already in place coming up. So that's, right now we've got the young core coming up. We've got Precious, we've got Gary, we've got OG, and we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Scotty Barnes. All under the age of 24, all got bright futures. So, hey, man, now's the time, right?
It absolutely is right now. And we've got decent contract situation. We've got stuff to break apart. But we can save that for next week. I'm not in a rush. We could talk about future picks. We could talk about the Lowry talking about how he tried to convince Vince Carter to come play for the team, but we got Jeremy Lin instead. Pretty happy we got Jeremy Lin. But that's like the classic Raptors controversy that's going right now. But honestly, I'm pretty content, my man. Anything else on your mind?
Man, no, I think we can just maybe do some hot takes if you're down.
I mean, I am happily down. I mentioned it earlier in this episode. A prediction, mystical as it might be for me, I'm combining them together, all right? Because one of these is definitely going to happen. The other one could be the opposite, but I'm looking at the T-Wolves and the Grizzlies. I want this battle of the animals to happen. Top 6 team in the West next season for both of them. Neither of them in the play-in. I want to see success from them.
I don't see why not, man. Again, when you think about the teams ahead of them, or in that category, you got Dallas, you got Phoenix, you got the Clippers, you got Golden State, maybe the Lakers. So, and like again, I would put the Grizz and Memphis with what they have in those categories, and maybe even ahead of Phoenix at this point, because I think Phoenix is taking a step back. Chris Paul is just getting a little bit up there in age, and I love the guy, but he's just a little bit up there.
It's going to be a fun season. The West is a bloodbath in certain points. The East is a ridiculous bloodbath. It's good to be back, Matt. I'm always pumped to chat with you about basketball and looking forward to next week, my friend.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're going to cut me off before my prediction of the Knicks are definitely not making the playoffs. But hey, everybody already knew that, so you could just wrap us up.
I just didn't want to have Knicks fans have to hear the truth coming out of your mouth. All right, my man. But we shall see. But yeah, great episode, my friend. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Leave us a follow, leave us a like, let us know. Check out theboardsports.net for new episodes and blog posts.
And we'll talk to you next time.